Welcome everyone to another SAS Wellness Summit Series event. We are so glad that you are joining us for this conversation with Dr. Kelly McGonigal. If we haven't met before, my name is Ann Wenstrom, and I am an elementary physical education teacher and the Employee Wellness Coordinator at SAS. I've been a part of our SAS Eagle family for 15 years. I am the co-chair of the Wellness Summit Series with my amazing colleague, Gemma Hoikis, who is a grade 3 teacher, WOW committee member, SAS strengths coach, and has been a part of our SAS Eagle family for 14 years. Before I introduce our host and facilitator for this event, I would like to take a moment to share our absolute gratitude and thanks to the SAS Foundation and the SAS Advancement Team for making this event possible. Everyone who has supported our SAS Foundation is helping to make extraordinary care for ourselves and our greater community an actual reality. So thank you. I am so pleased to start things out by introducing my dear friend, Nikki Mueller. Nikki is a phenomenal friend of our SAS community. Her background is in broadcast journalism. She is a TV presenter, event host, and is now enjoying her next chapter as a communications coach. She believes that clear, confident, and empathetic communicators can change the world, and she is on a mission to grow and support that tribe. A big welcome to Nikki Mueller.
Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you, Gemma. Thank you to the whole SAS community for having me. Complete cards on the table, by the way. So my background, I'm from ISM, right? International School Manila. I'm a Bearcat. So by definition, yes, we are part of the IASIS community, but we are meant to be mortal enemies. However, since graduating from high school, I have become more empathetic and resilient. And now I understand, of course, that actually you guys are totally family. All of us here from the international community, I think we've come to realize that this is our tribe. And sometimes the people in this community are more like family than your actual family, because it's a very unique way of living, isn't it? Because there's a sense of belonging in this tribe that you don't get anywhere else, because life is so transient. So honestly, I'm very, very grateful to SAS. I've hung out with you guys more than my own peers back in Manila, and I'm really, really happy to be here today to be introducing and chatting to this powerhouse woman who's waiting very patiently in the wings. So thanks to all of you for being a part of this. I promise you, it's going to be a great hour. It's going to be worth your kind of lunchtime on a Saturday, especially for Kelly, because she's coming to us on her Friday night where she could be out and about, but instead she wants to share her wisdom and her incredible charisma and her amazing research with us. So yes, you know who she is. Kelly McGonigal is a health psychologist. She's a best-selling author. She's a lecturer at Stanford University. I think she's just come from there too. She just had a late lecture tonight, so we're grateful. Really specializing in the understanding of that mind-body connection. And what's really ultimately wonderful about her approach is that it's so holistic. It's something that she's kind of created in her own, an ethos in her own, marrying health and psychology and science and anthropology, philosophy, spirituality, creating something that's very uniquely her own in her voice. And it's had such a tremendous impact on communities and people around the world, which is why I know we're here together to chat with her today. Great books like The Willpower Instinct, The Upside of Stress, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. How to Make Stress Your Friend is one of the most watched TEDx talks ever, with almost or more than 20 million views. If you haven't seen it, you need to see it after this, but we'll get into the crux of that today. And something wonderful she's really done and really kind of taken her mission broader is over at the Stanford Center for Compassion and Altruism. She helped to create Stanford Compassion Cultivating Training. How amazing is just the sound of that? This is such a unique program, now taught around the world to really help individuals strengthen their empathy, their compassion, and their self-compassion. And then in January 2020, this is music to our ears. She's one of my queens, Oprah Winfrey. So Oprah Magazine honored Kelly for her ability to transform scientific data into wisdom, to really show us where the rubber meets the road. And so they named McGonigal the first ever visionary, basically people whose groundbreaking way of seeing the world makes it a better future for us all. She has a new book out called The Joy of Movement. I know that's very near and dear to her heart, so we're going to hit the ground running. Kelly, you have no idea how grateful we are to you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Wow. I love the energy so far. Thank you, Nikki and Ann. And actually, I just got back from teaching 2 back-to-back dance classes at Stanford.
Really?
So I'm still riding the endorphin
You love
rush.
moving. That's your
Yes.
thing, music and movement.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That is awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We've got so many folks who have actually spent their lunchtime with us today, which goes to show what you work on, and basically your life's mission is really, really resonating with so many people around the world. I don't think this chat could have come at a better time as we're inching closer to 2 years of living in this pandemic world. So let's talk about that TEDx talk and the whole idea of how to make stress your friend. You know, you mentioned that when you change your mind about stress, you change the way your body responds to stress, right? So what has changed since in this field of science and your work since that came out in 2013? And
Yeah.
what's kind of stayed the same?
Right. Let me give you all the updates. So when I first gave that TED talk, actually, this was a really new idea in the research, what we now call the stress mindset effect. And we didn't even have that name for it when I gave the talk. It was this emerging idea that the way that you think about stress can interact with that stress to change how your body responds, how your brain responds, how you cope with stress, and that there are ways of thinking about stress that can help you have a healthier and more skillful and even more joyful response to stress. And the research on that has continued to emerge in the last decade. Some things that you all might be particularly interested to know. So first of all, the way of thinking about stress that is most helpful is to accept that it's part of life, that you can't actually avoid it. And you often cannot reduce it or even choose the type or amount of stress that you face in life. But you can choose how you respond, and that stress can activate really natural human strengths. So stress can bring out our courage, it can help us focus, it can clarify our values, it can encourage us to ask for help and connect with others, it can bring out our cooperation and compassion, and even our capacity to learn and grow. So that's the mindset that's really helpful, that you stop assuming your job is to avoid stress or suppress stress, but to look for ways to channel or harness it. It's a really pragmatic approach. And since I gave that talk, 2 studies that I think are really interesting have come out. One looked at how this mindset works in children and adolescents, and finding that kids who have a more positive and accepting attitude or mindset towards stress, who then go through a serious adversity, are much more likely to be able to make meaning out of that event, to start to integrate that event into the narrative of who they are and who they're becoming and what their life is about, in a way that creates positive meaning or kind of even like a post-adversity or stress-related growth. And then another study just came out following people over the COVID-19 pandemic, again, looking at stress mindsets and finding that people who had this more accepting and embracing view towards stress were more likely to report personal growth and positive change during the pandemic. So we see this idea continue to emerge. And the other ideas that were in the TED Talk that I just want to reiterate for those who haven't seen it. One is that you can make your stress response healthier by not fighting it. And particularly when that stress, feels like your heart is pounding, you feel anxious, you feel overwhelmed, you feel the adrenaline or the nerves of stress, that in that moment, if you accept that stress is arising because it's a moment that matters and something that you care about is at stake, and you don't have the story that says, I shouldn't be stressed, or this stress means I can't handle this, or this stress is toxic, and so now this stress is like destroying my health. If instead you say, this is normal, it's natural, I care, and I'm going to focus on what I can do in this moment, that it actually makes your stress response healthier in ways that over time can even reduce the risk of things like heart attacks and other stress-related illnesses. So that's one big idea, and that has continued to play out in the research. So many studies have demonstrated the power of that reappraisal. The other big idea in the talk was that stress can connect us, and that it is a natural response to stress to want to reach out to others. And I think, we're going to talk probably a lot more about that. But I would say that one of the things I've seen during COVID-19, that among people who have been able to deal with it and do relatively well with it, are those who embrace that idea of interdependence during stress, that, you can't do it on your own with some kinds of stress, the kind that's bigger than what you can control or change or avoid. And so I feel like this pandemic has made it even more obvious to people that in order to be good at stress, it means being willing to ask for help. It means finding community rather than isolation. And it means taking joy in being able to help others. That full spectrum of using stress as a catalyst for connection is so important.
For sure. And one of the things you mentioned in your talk is that when life gets difficult, right, your stress response wants you to be surrounded by people that you care about. And there's the science behind that that drives it, which really blew my mind. It was a game changer when I had a look at that.
And can we talk a little bit about what those signals are? Because people can
Yeah.
misinterpret those signals.
Yeah, please.
So the biology, right? So when stress is bigger than you can just rise to the challenge, like some forms of stress, deadlines, whatever, you can just you can do it and use that adrenaline. But a lot of the stress we face is bigger than that. And we start to feel that overwhelm or that despair, or even sometimes shame. In those moments, if your brain recognizes that this stress is bigger than you and you aren't alone, it's going to start nudging you to reach out by changing your biochemistry and your brain chemistry, including a hormone called oxytocin, which really makes us more open to connection and sometimes even makes us hungry for social connection. So sometimes how that shows up is we actually feel lonely. And what I found is some people misinterpret that. So when they're stressed out and they feel lonely, they think it means they're alone or that nobody cares, when actually that feeling of loneliness is meant to be like an appetite that drives you to connect with others, to reach out to others. The other way that it can show up is a literal hunger. So little known fact, when you eat a lot of food, you release oxytocin in a way that can be soothing, in a similar to social connection or a hug. And sometimes our brains, we've learned this, that if we're very full, if we eat comfort food, we get this feeling that is very similar to being literally held by people who care about us. And so sometimes we stress eat.
Very fleeting feeling though, it doesn't last.
It is, it doesn't last, but it's again, sometimes it's that biology, we kind of miss the signal. And so instead of asking for help, or instead of looking for a way to spend time with others, we turn to stress eating. But even that is part of the biology of your stress response nudging you to reach out to others. So at the minimum, you should be sharing that comfort food with somebody who cares about you. And then that's much better.
So fascinating. And you were saying, this kind of reminds me of the time when I was in high school. So similar high school to these folks in Manila, and the stress of the IB. I still believe today, the International Baccalaureate and that kind of training and that certificate to this day, many, many years later, is still the toughest thing I've ever done. And now that I'm talking to you, it's starting to make sense how much support we should really be giving each other. And it's great that SAS is doing this as a community during those formative years where your bodies and your mind is under intense pressure. And I didn't handle it well. In fact, I had a gallstone attack at 17 years old. And they're writing about me, articles about me, because doctors were like, that shouldn't happen to a 17-year-old. What was the reason? It was the deadlines, it was the exams, it was all of this. So that kind of positive mindset, like you're saying, through community, rather than thinking I can do this on my own and I have to do this on my own, seems to be really important.
There are a couple of other things that I think about when it comes to youth, and also with the Stanford students that I'm more in contact with. A couple of things that take time to emerge that are sources of resilience. One is having gone through enough stress and adversity and challenge that you have a really coherent narrative about yourself as somebody who can rise to the challenge, who can overcome obstacles, who knows how to use their support network, who can adapt to change and even crisis. And this is something that emerges over the lifespan. People get better at stress. And when you ask people who are dealing with a lot of stress, what strength are you relying on? They will almost always tell you that it's from some stress in the past that taught them something about who they were and how to get through challenges. And so it's really important, I think, to remember that when people are younger, it's not that they don't have those strengths, but they may not yet have that same kind of narrative where they have a deep sense of self-trust from having been through difficulties before. It's actually one of the reasons why young adults who have been through serious adversity often are more resilient than people who haven't yet. But the other thing that can be missing is a real sense of autonomy and freedom, that this is something I chose for myself. And there are a lot of choices I can make in this process that reflect my values and my goals and my priorities. And so anytime you're removing that sense of really autonomy and being in control, that stress can feel a little bit more overwhelming or a little bit more challenging to deal with. And so I think that part of, empathy is remembering what it's like when there's a lot of things that aren't under your control, and to look for ways to give young people a real understanding that there are many ways to create a wonderful life for yourself, lots of different paths. There's like no error that could happen that will destroy that possibility for you. And it's really hard at a young age to have that perspective, to understand how many different trajectories your life can go on that all are interesting and wonderful. And that's part of, I think, our responsibility as adults, get equally stressed about, I have to succeed at this so that I can succeed at that, so I can,
Because that's how it is, especially in academically rigorous institutions, right? But I wonder, in terms of kind of holding space and supporting adolescents through this, I'm guessing you would encourage them to just kind of talk about it, right? Sometimes you just need to say it and give it a character, just let it come to life. Are there certain questions maybe we could be asking them, or kind of nudging them in a specific direction where they can be more open and to be able to change that narrative to be a bit more positive? Anything you would suggest?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we know is that getting clarity about your values changes the way that young people interpret stress. So the conversation doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, you seem really stressed, tell me about that. It doesn't have to be that, process your feelings at that level. It's, what's most important to you right now? What really matters to you? The roles, the activities, the relationships, and tell me why. What kind of what contribution can you imagine making in the future? These really serious conversations where you are sincerely interested in understanding what matters to that young person. I mean, they could be having this conversation with anyone or even just by themselves, like as a writing exercise. But we know that having that kind of foundation, I know what matters to me. I have a vision for how I might want to contribute to the world, create the world that I want to see, that it becomes more likely that a young person will then meet challenges in their life from a lens that draws out their strengths or helps them make choices consistent with their values and their priorities, and start to, be able to create these future self-defining memories, these future self-defining moments where they can imagine themselves moving through this moment into a role that would be really important to them. Other conversations is the stories that we tell about stress. So we know that when people hear stories that reflect the potential for stress-related growth or change, or when people see role models of self-care, that people who are making choices that support their ability to thrive, that role modeling and that storytelling is really important too. And so one of the things that I'm always encouraging adults to do is to reflect in their own lives. What are you doing right now to pursue a stress related goal, like a positive stress goal that is asking you to rely on the same kind of strengths that you expect the kids in your life or the teens in your life or the college students in your life to do. And it can't be parenting, because no kid is going to ever believe it, right? No matter how challenging you're giving everything you have to being an amazing parent, they're not going to quite notice that. You need to be have a hobby or training for a marathon or going back to school or whatever, starting your own business, something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, living by example and really showing them. And like so you said, self-care, self-compassion. This is obviously something that we talk about often when it comes to well-being and wellness through all stages of life, not just when you're older and you realize you need it, but really from the onset. Can you give us some examples of why this is so important? In some ways we can nurture this in ourselves, especially
Yeah.
starting young.
I actually think of self-care and self-compassion as being separate things. So self-compassion is believing that you are deserving of compassion, both from yourself and from others. And compassion is when you can recognize suffering, when you are moved by the suffering or the pain that you're aware of, with a desire to relieve it, and the belief that there's something you can do to relieve that pain or suffering. So when you feel compassion for a friend or a family member or a stranger, that's how it unfolds. First, you have to be able to recognize it. You have to be moved by it, feel kind of empathy toward it, and also a sense of confidence and courage. Like, I'm going to do something to make this better or make this person feel better. And that can be really challenging when the stress or pain is our own, which is what self-compassion requires, because sometimes we have a tendency to deny our own pain or suffering because, we minimize it because maybe it's not as bad as some other suffering in the world. Maybe we deny it because we're afraid that if we admit it, we'll become overwhelmed by it and we need to stay strong. If you're like me, it's really hard to admit it because it feels really vulnerable to be honest about it. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want other people to view me as weak. And so maybe like don't want to pay attention to it. And also, we have some pretty powerful human instincts when it comes to our own pain or stress or suffering: self-criticism, shame, sadness, grief, fear. These are all really powerful instincts that compete with compassion. So when it comes to self-compassion, sometimes the best way to get at it is to learn to recognize it, to be with and breathe your own pain or stress, and then imagine what you would say or how you would help someone you care about who has a similar situation. And then the second part of self-compassion that's so important is it's not do it yourself, right? It's not go into a closet and like make yourself feel better, which is sometimes where I think people take self-compassion, like you're in your own little bubble. A big part of self-compassion is, okay, now how do you ask for help? How do you have the courage to talk about it with somebody who cares about you? And how do you believe that you're worthy of other people's kindness, help, compassion? A lot of people have a real fear or discomfort with receiving compassion. And so looking for ways to reach out to others is part of what self-compassion is about.
Absolutely. And we hear this, the age old adage, right? That if we ask for help, sometimes we feel weak, but really it takes so much strength to do that. And if you have the holistic perspective, right, of the long game of the benefits of asking for help.
And here's the other thing to keep in mind. Like if you're like me, and that is you were raised to never admit that you are suffering, never ask for help, that it's all a big secret and don't ever be a burden. Like that was how I was raised. This is what I had to learn. I mean, there's all this research. This was in the TED Talk. When you help other people, it creates resilience. When you help someone else, it gives you courage. It gives you hope. It is good for your heart health and your immune system. So when you allow other people to help you, it's not a burden. It is a gift to them. It is empowering to them, which of course we know if we reflect in our own lives, how meaningful it can feel when we make a contribution or when we help someone else out. And so a big part of it is this kind of to allow other people to get the same joy and meaning, and to have that empowering experience of being able to help someone that they care about.
Are there any sort of tips that you would have, or something quick? I know people always ask this, give me the quick fix for my life, but something tangible that we could take with us if we are experiencing a stressful situation, but we want to get a handle of it. We want to change our response to it, to welcome it versus to run away. Is there anything that we could do, whether if we're sitting or standing, or maybe it's a visualization? Is there anything you might suggest?
Yeah, I can give you lots. Let's start with some. These are, I'll just say they're all evidence-based. I won't tell you all the studies, but these are all ones that have been demonstrated to both empower you to deal with stress. So you will actually respond more skillfully and feel more confident or more hopeful, but they also change your physiology in ways that are healthy and helpful. So the first is really good if it's performance stress or anxiety stress, like you're giving a talk or going to a meeting, or you're having a difficult conversation, or you're jumping out of an airplane, whatever you're doing that makes you nervous, is to embrace stress as energy that you can harness. And the way that I do it, because you'll feel it, you'll feel that anxiety or those nerves. I will pay attention to those physiological symptoms and I say, my heart is in it. And that's the way that I remember that mindset reset. Literally, my heart is pounding to give me energy. And it reminds me that I care. So that's one quick tip. You could literally just put your hand on your heart and say, I'm stressed. My heart is in it. And literally that can be enough to create a mindset reset. Another thing that the research shows really helps people deal with all kinds of stress is if you send a supportive text message to somebody else. So even if you're the one feeling stressed, like you don't text and be like, quick, send me a supportive text message. I need it. You could, but actually if you just think like, who's someone in my life right now who maybe needs a little, boost, text someone that you care, wish them luck with something that they're doing, whatever, send them a lovely emoji. And that actually changes people's physiology and outlook in a way that helps them cope with stress. Another thing that I like to do for stress when what I need is a kind of courage, which that's sort of my particular, when I'm not coping well with stress, I tend to shut down. We all have our own not so helpful stress habits. My worst instincts are to freeze and to disappear. So I use a breathing exercise that comes from contemplative traditions where I imagine breathing in and out of my heart as a kind of like giving my heart the energy it needs to be brave. And I literally, it's almost like I imagine putting my nostrils on the center of my chest and I imagine breathing in and out. Some really interesting research on how that changes our autonomic nervous system and our stress hormones in a way that like really creates the biology of courage and of self-control and the biology of connection to others. So, so those are a few things that can be helpful on the spot.
Incredibly, four amazing things that we can do pretty quickly. And I love that. I love what you said about also sending a text message to someone else, which really enhances the fact that you said, caring for others, it creates resilience. It's all sort of mind-body connection. It's what you do. So thank you for that. I was chatting with Anne before this, and we were talking about the obvious. Christmas is coming. It's been almost 2 years of living in this pandemic. Many folks will have the chance, the lucky ones will have a chance to go back to their home countries or wherever they're from and meet friends and family after a long time. This reunion is going to be different to any other reunion they've ever been through for so many reasons. It's going to be overwhelming for sure, for a couple of reasons. The first thing we wanted to touch on and get your 2 cents on was being around people again, being around several people again, people that you care about and want to connect with, but there is going to be a physiological resistance, I think, to it because it's so new and it's so different and we haven't felt that or been through that in a while. Is there anything you can suggest that we do to kind of breathe through that?
I know I went through a version of that, here where I live, I went 6 months without seeing essentially anyone except my husband for 6 months. So I remember that like re-entry phase.
Yeah.
The first thing that I encourage people to do is to pick a mantra that you can use when you're interacting with other people that really reflects your values and why this is meaningful to you. So a mantra that I've used is, it is so good to see you. And another one is, I am so glad to be here. And I know it sounds kind of silly or cheesy, but you have to pick your own that really resonates with you. But something that allows you to drop in a moment of like chaos or discomfort to really that core level of why we missed that connection. And also, I feel it's really important to be able to honor what we've missed. So I like those mantras because they reflect a value for the connection. But for me, they also acknowledge what was lost. And I feel like this moment deserves a kind of gravity, that it's not all just joyful reunion, it's partly joyful reunion. And also there are things that have been missed, and there may be people who are missing in this reunion. And if you can come up with a mantra that allows you to kind of like rest in that gravity of it, I think it will empower you to then say the right thing or navigate some of the awkwardness, make that eye contact, offer that touch in a way that really transcends the stress of like all the travel to get there. And then like oh, I haven't seen people in a long time. The other thing I would say is when conflict emerges, because this often happens.
I mean, Christmas reunions with family. Yeah.
Family is also, there's something that we teach in the Stanford Compassion Cultivation Training. It's a phrase called just like me. And then the rest of it is just like me, this person wants to be happy and free from suffering. And there are many iterations of it. And just like me, this person sometimes struggles, or just like me, this person wants to love and be loved, to be appreciated and to make a difference. I mean, there's so many reflections we do, and then we boil it down to just like me. So in that moment, when you're interacting with someone and you get into some sort of conflict, to drop into that, just like me, this person wants to be happy and free from suffering, or just like me, this person has been through a lot this past, during the pandemic, or just like me, this person is doing their best, again, is a kind of a reset. And I really feel like if we focus on what we want from this experience and think about how we can create that for others and lower the expectations on other people, it's almost like you're the host for yourself and for others. And then to kind of ease up on any expectations of how other people are going to be. I would say and I mean this in a really positive way. There's actually a Buddhist saying that to give up hope is the best way to enter any situation. And then I don't mean like be hopeless, but the sense that whatever the rules are you have about how this has to be, the fewer rules you can have, the more positive things can emerge.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. Just like me is a wonderful mantra, or at least saying in any situation, and it kind of resonates with me because I practice Reiki, which is a Japanese energy balancing system, which is really about the mind-body connection too. And one of the things that we say often is just for today, and then follow it with something. So we're fully present. We know that we can't control tomorrow or the next day. We can just be here right now, just for today. We'll show love and respect to this human being. Can't promise you I'll do it tomorrow, but we'll do it today. So this is great. And I like that you reference travel as well, that these are things, it's like my dad, he's going to have to go through 18 steps before he can leave the Philippines to meet me for Christmas, right? And he's overwhelmed by that. But if you reframe it, like you're saying, and say, just like me, these folks at immigration or at the safety checks want to make sure that everyone here is traveling in a safe environment and can get home to their families, rather than also, why are they here doing this to me?
I know. Then two other things that you can remember that might be helpful. One is, when you were at your lowest, what were you hoping for? And for a lot of people, it was this. So even though it may be unfolding in a way that's stressful, it can be really useful to remind yourself that this is what you were waiting for. And the idea of this is what helped people get through some difficult times. The other thing is, I will sometimes say to myself, this is what we trained for when things get really complicated. So things go wrong for traveling, or whatever happens. Whether or not you actually trained for it, but to tap into that attitude of like, an athlete or, somebody who's really elite and trained for some difficult task. And I often will tell myself, like, all the stuff we went through so far to get here, this is what we trained for. And we just take it step by step.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for that. A question here about, adolescents. I gotta say, I'm so glad I didn't grow up with social media. I remember being the last person in my school to get a cell phone because I was super obsessed with my pager. It was neon green and I loved it. And everyone else had these Nokias. I was like, I'm never going to get it. Because, I don't think I would have at the time had the emotional capacity to compartmentalize someone's highlight reel compared to real life. But, this is the way things are right now. So is there anything that you would say or tell a teenager or a young person right now about having to navigate this digitally connected world and still remaining kind of grounded and resilient and hopeful?
Yeah, I mean, I would say two things around that. One is to have a real sense of humility for those of us who are a generation older or more. One thing that's really true is that each generation comes to technology and the changing culture and is truly having a different experience than we had. So I want to put that perspective around this, that I can give some advice based on some research, but I also am very aware that we will never be the ones so now I'm Gen X. I grew up with email was basically it. We don't fully understand the current reality, and we won't be the ones to come up with the best solutions. That really is going to be on young people to understand their own experience and come up with their best coping strategies. So I can tell you that what the research says on social media and technology and mental health, which is that the more you focus on using it to contribute, to put something positive out in the world and to amplify other people or support or connect with other people, like you're the one leaving the most supportive comments, or you're the one producing content, not out of a self-focused mindset, like how can I make myself look good? But if I were on the receiving end of this TikTok video or this Instagram post, how would it make me feel? And you're actually trying to put out content where you are having this empathic idea that the person seeing it is not going to be impressed by you. They're going to be uplifted, or they're going to laugh. They're going to, have a stress break with some, funny prank you did on a TikTok video. That it really is that mindset.
Yeah.
And to spend less time being passive. We know that is really not associated with positive mental health, the just consuming other people's stuff. And then also, getting lost in feedback to your own posts or sharing or videos. It's almost like you have to share and move on.
I like that. It's being mindful of how you participate in this online social world as well. That's incredible. Thank you. Thank you.
But I also would say, people have to pay attention to their own direct experiences. So I'm talking about research, but like I said, I'm not really sure we know. And so I would always say to the person who was either asking for advice or this advice is getting inflicted onto without them asking for it, is pay attention to your own experience. How do you feel after a certain way of interacting with technology or a platform? Mm-hmm. You need to learn to trust your own direct experience and to do what sustains you, what gives you life, and to learn to protect yourself or take care of yourself and not engage with the stuff that makes you feel worse.
Thank you so much for that. And Kelly, I want to slowly transition into this incredible new book that you've written that I know is very near and dear to your heart, because movement seems to really light you up right from the get-go. I remember you had mentioned there's an excerpt in The Joy of Movement, right? That there's very few moments that you remember with absolute clarity, and that was when you had to do the hard thing for something that you really, really wanted to do, but you'd put in the back burner for so long because of self-doubt and fear. If you could tell everybody about that a little bit, and then we'll get into the movement bit.
That was auditioning to be an aerobics instructor back when we still called it aerobics. I was auditioning to teach for the Stanford aerobics program. Yeah, I mean, my whole life, I grew up in the 1980s when aerobics were first a thing. And I just had this idea that the most wonderful job in the world would be to be a fitness instructor, an aerobics instructor, because I loved how I felt when I moved in synchrony to music to like exercise videos. Anyways, it's hard to explain but this was a vision I had, an instinct I had. And I also was incredibly shy, introverted, social anxiety. And I ended up taking a seminar while I was a graduate student at Stanford. It was called The Psychology of Shyness, which is really a polite way, basically the psychology of massive anxiety. And our final project for the whole course was to do something that we were avoiding because of shyness or anxiety. And so the whole course I used as a way to prepare myself to audition to teach aerobics. It was the best thing I ever did. And the moment before I went to audition, I was so overwhelmed with anxiety. I almost left. I was planning to just go home and pretend that it didn't happen. It didn't exist because of just how uncomfortable the anxiety was. And that was my first experience choosing meaning over fear. It was actually the first time I can remember very clearly not letting my anxiety lead to avoidance because it was so meaningful. So yeah, I think we're going to do some movement now, aren't we?
I would love to. That's what I was going to ask you next before we go into the science about what happens in our brain. Let's get moving. I know you've been waiting to do it too. You had your
I know. And it's okay. So let me tell folks what we're going to do. This is going to be so quick. It's going to be over before you know it. It's like 3 minutes of movement, totally optional. And I'm going to, so let me put up my slides now and I'll explain what we are going to do. Awesome. This is a game. It's a movement game. It involves moving and it involves the chat. So I also have to get the chat up so I can see it. Okay, chat is up. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to show you an image of somebody moving in a way that could be fun or meaningful. And I'm going to ask you if you're willing to mimic that movement as best you can in the space that you're in. Okay. You can do this in a chair. If you're able to stand up, you're welcome to stand up and do it standing. And I encourage you, if you want to get just a little bit of like adrenaline, dopamine, burst, like do it full out. Why not? 3 minutes of moving your body is enough to get what's called the feel better effect. It's caused by an immediate release of dopamine and adrenaline that gives you energy, that improves your mood. So we can actually test that out right now and see if it's true. And after each form of movement, I'm going to ask you to enter in the chat how either it made you feel or how you think it would make you feel if you were really doing it like a real workout in the right environment. Okay, so here we go. And I'm going to do it with you. So you can also just follow what I'm doing. Okay. First up, battle ropes. All right, let's be like this amazing woman. So in a chair or standing, you're going to lean forward, pick up these really heavy battle ropes. They have this nice grippy texture, and you're going to start to slam the floor. You got to brace your core, and you might want to put on that face that she's got right there. I'm making sound effects because sound effects are fun. Ooh, all right, that was like 30 seconds right there. Either how does that feel, or how in the chat, how do you think it would make you feel to do this type of battle workout? Ooh, strong. Rambo, woohoo, powerful, cool. Yeah. By the way, it's okay to also say things like silly, because not every form of movement is for everybody. Ooh, I like it. Invincible.
You guys are great. You fit, satisfying.
Really? Okay, great. You get the idea. Oh, I love that someone could feel playful with this too. Exactly. It doesn't have to be that serious. All right, time to move again. All right, so I want you to imagine that you are racing or running or pushing if you were in a chair. So I'm going to mimic what he's doing first. I'm going to imagine that I'm outside and I am racing, I'm running. If you're standing, you can stand up and really swing with it. If you want to imagine that you're running, you can run. Yep. That's it, 30 seconds of that. And then once you get the feeling of it, the wind in your face, is maybe the sun on your face, how do you think you would feel? Man, I'm so energized just talking about this. Yeah, free. Oh my gosh. So let me tell you, I use these examples a lot, and free is the one that always comes up with running or with racing. Great. Okay. We've got 5, by the way. If you're wondering how many are we going to do, we're going to do 5.
Awesome.
Okay. Next. All right. So you do not have to actually know anything about ballet or dance to move your arms in a way that resembles ballet and dance. If you are standing, maybe like this gentleman, maybe you even lift a leg, but allow yourself, I know you can't see me from up there, even in a chair, you could lift a leg. Maybe you turn your gaze to follow the direction of your arms. How do we feel when we move like this?
So good. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Amazing.
You look beautiful. I can see you all, right? So graceful. Yeah. Anything else when we dance? Maybe it's a bar workout. Grounded, connected, elegant. Yes. Ooh, present. Love it. That is so true with both ballet and bar. I am beautiful. Yes.
Yes, you are.
All right. Next. Imagine got your boxing gloves on. This is one of my favorites. Okay, so you got to imagine your target. So maybe there's a heavy bag in front of you and you're going to start to throw your punches. One target, jab, jab cross. If you know other punches like a hook or an uppercut, feel free to throw them in. If you have no idea, just throw punches, just throw punches. It doesn't matter. All right. And after 30 seconds of punches, I love you know what to do. Badass, brave and strong, relieved. Yeah, they're going to be such catharsis in punching.
Oh, sorry.
In control.
Contori.
Woo. Oh, in contori? I don't know what that. Oh, in control. No control.
Yeah. Relieved.
All right.
I get that sense. Relieved is a great one. Yeah. Yeah.
Pumped up, strong. All right, one last one, and this will bring us to a nice close. Again, feel free to stand. I'm staying seated just so that I stay in camera angle.
Yeah.
Let's take some sun breaths, inhaling the arms out and as up as they go, and exhale, release. So let's imagine we're doing this workout where we're moving with the breath. Inhale. If you were standing, you could take a warrior pose, if you know what warrior pose is. Let's take 2 more breaths like this. Yeah, and then feel free to enter in the chat how this type of movement makes you feel. Yeah, grounded, centered, self-aware, calmed, happy and content, light, chill.
Beautiful.
Steady, living in the moment. Yeah. So let me share with you why I like this exercise that we just did, sort of what the core idea is. You know, we're so often used to thinking of movement or exercise as something that we do to change how we look or to improve our health, you know, to maintain a weight, to lose weight, to get strong and buff or whatever. And when our focus is on things like calories burned or what our body looks like, or even like keeping our blood pressure low, it can get harder to notice how much meaning is embedded in movement. I mean, you clearly just experienced that when we move our bodies in different ways, it brings out different aspects of ourselves. It creates specific emotions and psychological states and mindsets. Movement is a way to experience your body as a vehicle for all of those strengths and those qualities and those emotions. And you can choose activities based on how they make you feel about yourself, how they make you feel about your community, how they make you feel about the future. And so I just like this as proof of concept, because most people, even if you've never had any experience with any of those forms of movement, you get a sense right away of what the possibility is. And it's a really great way to think about how to make movement a part of your life. I spent, when I mentioned those 6 months of COVID, when I was really isolated, I actually bought a used heavy bag off of Nextdoor. And I trained in my driveway every day, punching and kicking that heavy bag, because it was, for me, the antidote to, as I mentioned, my unhealthy stress habit, which is basically despair, shutting down. And I found that it was boxing that actually tapped into my will to live, my fighting spirit, which was the antidote to depression that I needed. Even though, now when I'm less isolated, the type of movement that calls to me the most is dance, because I can do it with other people. And I have so much joy in that. So that was the purpose of that exercise. And
I
I
mean,
hope.
incredible. I'm just now, and I don't know if people are still buzzing from that. I mean, are you guys still buzzing from that? I'm already still feeling the effects, and it was less than 3
Yes.
minutes.
And again, like, this is also the proof of concept. So if you want to get even more out of this, add a song that you love. So we know that when people move to music, it enhances that feel better effect, because music is one of the easiest ways to improve your mood. And it also releases endorphins. So it's like a way to hack the exercise high. Usually you have to exercise for 20 minutes to get a real exercise high. And when you move to music, you can get that high almost immediately because of how powerful music
further
is.
than you think you can when it's a song that you like. Because for me, I
Yeah, that's
spin,
true
and
too.
I notice how I can push my body in ways I never knew were possible when it's a jam that I really love, and how irritated I get actually when I dislike the music.
I know. Then you have to treat it like something else, turn it into a distress tolerance exercise.
Thank you for that. Thank you. I'm going to try that next time. Distress tolerance. But what I like is that the effects that we're feeling, obviously something's happening in our brains, and I'm going to ask you about what that is, what's going on in our brains, and the positive effects that we're having is linked to movement, not to fitness. You said that before, and I found that so fascinating. Could you tell us
Right.
more?
Yeah, like fitness is things like, your maximum heart rate and how much weight you can lift or how fast you can go. All those objective outcomes actually have nothing to do with the psychological and the social benefits of movement, nor does weight, nor does physical ability. So let's talk a little bit about when people are engaged in movement that works for their bodies and that either brings them some kind of joy or meaning or positive challenge, right? Because I could make you miserable with movement if I make you do something that's not appropriate for your body while yelling at you and, and playing a music that you hate, right? So we could screw it up, but as long as you're in control of this and you're navigating it for yourself, I've already mentioned some of the changes come from brain chemistry. So as soon as you start to move, when you haven't been moving, you get an increase in dopamine and adrenaline, which just give you energy and make you more optimistic. That's the feel better effect. It happens like literally immediately. Now you can enhance that effect by going longer. At about 20 minutes of movement, you start releasing endocannabinoids, which are the brain chemicals that cannabis mimics. But from exercise, their primary effect is to give you that real high of feeling powerful and empowered, less pain, less stress. And endocannabinoids also increase our feeling of belonging and connection. So it's a really powerful antidote to loneliness or to social anxiety. And we also know that other forms of activity will give you endorphins, and particularly moving with other people or moving to music that you love. And another way you can boost all of these benefits are to exercise outdoors. So that amplifies all the things that I've talked about. But the other thing I want to mention about how this affects the brain, it doesn't have to do with like brain chemicals. It has to do with signals from your body to your mind. So when you were imagining, like those of you who are imagining doing the battle ropes, we know that when you lift something heavy and you produce forceful movement, powerful movement, there's feedback from your grip. There's feedback from the pull of the muscles on the tendons to your bone. All of that sends signals to your brain, and your brain is understanding what's happening in your body. And because of how proprioception or self-sensing works, your brain will interpret those signals not just as my hands are clenched, my muscles are contracted. It gets this overall sense of what you're doing, and it interprets that as who you are. I am powerful. I am strong. Somebody said, I am badass. And it's one of the ways that movement affects our brain is by creating a sense of self that is undeniable and comes from the quality of the movement itself. I'm free. I'm elegant. I am grounded. And I think it's just one of the most beautiful things about movement.
Absolutely. And it's almost like the antithesis of what we usually say is if you think it, your body will feel it. Actually, no, if you do it with your body, then your mind believes that it's happening, that it is, right?
Yes. Hey, I just saw something in the chat I wanted to respond to. So somebody
Yes.
said endo what?
Or
And I typed in
yes, yes.
endocannabinoids. They are the real endorphins behind an exercise high. Everyone thinks endorphins are, but if you want endorphins, you got to work out to music or with other people or work harder. Endocannabinoids come first from much easier levels of workout, like going for a brisk walk or, the moderate level. And endocannabinoids, again, are really interesting as a brain chemical because they dial down inner suffering. They reduce pain, they reduce stress, they reduce worry, they reduce anger, all that stuff. And then endocannabinoids also enhance pleasure and positive emotions. So that's why the exercise high is a high. But I saw somebody else asked about myokines.
Yes.
And so maybe can I launch with that?
Yeah,
because myokines, this is the most, so clearly somebody either has heard me talk before or maybe read the book. If you don't know what myokines are, get ready to have your mind blown. This is the most interesting scientific finding of the last decade, as far as I'm concerned. Forget the stress mindset effect, myokines. So until about a decade ago, biologists literally did not know that your muscles act like endocrine organs in that they produce and release chemicals into your bloodstream that affect every other system of your body. So like we literally just thought muscles move your bones around. That's it. They're just meat that moves bones. But now we know all of your muscles are basically a pharmacy, in the same way that like your adrenals, your pituitary gland, they're manufacturing hormones and other chemicals. Your muscles are manufacturing chemicals. And the ones that your muscles manufacture are really, really good for you. They do things like boost your immune system, help your bones get stronger, improve your cardiovascular health. And they are released by your muscles when you move, primarily through repeated contraction of muscles. So if you don't move regularly, your pharmacy is closed. And as soon as you start to use your muscles for any type of movement, your muscles start to release these molecules into your bloodstream that are essentially medicine for every system of your body. And that also includes your brain. So some myokines make your brain more resilient to stress. Some of them prevent age-related diseases like Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease. And the nickname for some of these myokines that maybe you'll remember is hope molecules. I came across that term in a scientific paper that was talking about why exercise can prevent or treat depression and trauma. And it's because when you exercise, your muscles are releasing these molecules into your bloodstream that travel to your brain, where they act like an antidepressant. And they really help your brain either recover from trauma or depression or severe stress, or they can make your brain more resilient to protect you in the future. And so they dubbed them hope molecules. They were like, we've discovered hope molecules. But so you can think of exercise as an intravenous dose of hope.
Oh, that is incredible. Thank you so much, Kelly. And the message here from Ted in the chat, right? So the language of muscles to the body, it's just incredible. Myokines, this is great. I wish I had you as a teacher. I failed biology. Do you still want to talk? I was like, she just actually explained this to me, something that I would have found extremely difficult to interpret. So thank you very much for leveling with us here. A quick question. Okay, a lot of folks, and actually sent me an article that was published here, I think a couple days ago. Singapore, so the rate of obesity is really on the rise. It's at the highest it's been since 2010 here. For obvious reasons, it was a stricter lockdown. Folks were told to go in. We used to say, we used to tell our kids to go out and run and play and be amongst groups. Like you say, group exercise has a phenomenal effect, or ancient human instincts to bond and to connect. And all of a sudden we said, no, don't do that. We can't. So there's a lot of binge drinking that's been happening as well in young folks. Binge eating, as you mentioned, a way of handling, one of the coping mechanisms of handling the stress. So what would you say, advice now for people who think they don't want to exercise in any form? Maybe they're afraid to do it, or they just don't feel they can get over the first hurdle because it'll just be too hard. You know,
Yeah.
like you said before, some people consider it as punishment for enjoying life. So we got to
Yeah.
reframe that. What would
I
you say?
mean, so it's funny. The first thing I'd actually say is I never talk about weight or weight loss as a reason for movement. Now, if you wanted to argue, can you change your body with exercise? It's possible, but the research is also very clear that people who link exercise to weight loss or appearance motivations are far less likely to stick with it, even if they achieve those goals. There's something about associating exercise with weight and what your body looks like that literally destroys people's capacity to find joy and meaning and purpose in movement. So even if you are sincerely concerned about obesity rates or the weight of a loved one and you're worried about their health, you just have to get over that association and put it aside. And that's also true if you're somebody who hasn't moved in a while and is looking to become active. I know it's not an easy thing to do, but I just have to put it out there because a lot of harm that is happening in the fitness community and in individual families is when this link is so tight that people just keep associating exercise with shame and with self-judgment. So we'll put that aside. And if you're looking to get started, a couple of things to think about. One is there's no dose or intensity too small to get some real benefit from it, health or mental health. Literally, there's no dose too small. And major epidemiological studies have looked at this. Like if you walk for 10 minutes a week, cumulatively, that's better than walking for 0 minutes a week. And this is a level at which really anyone can get started. Then ask yourself, what is an activity that either will be enjoyable or will make me feel about myself a way that I want to feel about myself, like proud that I did it or accomplished that I got through it? Because movement won't always be pleasurable. Sometimes the most meaningful forms of movement are uncomfortable. You go to a class, even though you're intimidated. You do an exercise that makes you sore afterwards because you haven't moved your body that way in a while. You do a form of movement where you have to take a break because you are strengthening yourself. And that feeling of fatigue is actually the sign that you're getting stronger. But so you have that frame around it, and then you just start where you are and take that first step. And in my experience, when people look for a form of movement where it has nothing to do with burning calories, it has nothing to do with like something they're tracking on their watch, and it's just about their direct experience while doing it, people make different choices and they find that activity where it puts them in contact with a place that inspires them, like being outdoors, or people that they enjoy being around, or the activity itself brings out something in them that they enjoy.
I liked that because I heard you talk about this before. You gave an example of just, look at what's important to you or something you want to experience a bit more of. And you said it was like, do you like cats? Do you like animals? Go volunteer at a shelter, spend time with them. That's movement. And that's time doing something that it matters to you and makes you happy. But actually you're not thinking, oh my God, I'm moving my arms. I'm going, I love that. It doesn't have to be group
movement
exercise.
Is engaging with life through your body.
So
it can be gardening, it can be volunteering, it can be walking a dog, it can be dancing, it can be anything. And so if you ask yourself, well, what would be like an active way to engage with life? Do I want to compete? Do I want to contribute? Do I want to have fun? That's, people come up with all sorts of ways of movement that doesn't necessarily require like setting your timer for your 30-minute workout.
Absolutely. And you know what? We have a couple of minutes left. I just want to let everyone know, if you have a burning question, please put that in the chat. I might ask one more for Kelly, and then that gives us time. I should have reminded you about that at the top, but I just dove in.
Yeah.
So
I do see a question in there.
Cortisol,
so
right?
I'm going to ask Laura to go maybe give me more information about that. So a question about cortisol, because cortisol is a great stress hormone. Cortisol is the stress hormone that basically both helps you use the energy that stress gives you. It increases brain plasticity in a way that can help you learn from stress. And also when it's functioning well, it creates a natural cascade that allows you to recover from stress. So I say this because cortisol has a really bad rap. People will like buy drugs that claim to get rid of your cortisol. So I want to just start off by saying that cortisol is a natural, healthy hormone. And in fact, a lot of studies that look at positive changes related to stress are actually looking for an increase in cortisol when you wake up in the morning. That cortisol awakening response is basically a sign of how engaged in life you are. And people who are depressed or people who've experienced trauma, sometimes what you see is a real blunting of cortisol, which is literally your body basically saying, I don't want to be alive, or your brain saying like, I'm not here for this. So if you have heard this message that like stress is unhealthy because of cortisol, I just want to, really offer a different mindset that every aspect of our stress response is actually really functional. And whenever you start to think that anything about stress is inherently toxic, we get into trouble and we start both misunderstanding stress and sometimes doing things that are unhelpful, like taking drugs that are meant to suppress a really important part of our stress response. Now, we also know that when people are stressed out, they can have different ratios of stress hormones. And so in order for a stress response to be really healthy, you often want cortisol balanced with other hormones like DHEA or oxytocin, which really support kind of the full cycle of stress and stress recovery, including resilience and physical recovery from stress. So there are a couple of things that you can do that we know help create that healthier stress profile. One is sleep, which I know is sometimes it's easier said than done. But when your brain has adequate sleep, your profile of stress hormones tends to be more balanced in this way we sometimes call the growth index of your stress response. Also, your mindset matters. So people who believe that stress can be helpful have a healthier ratio of stress hormones, cortisol balanced by things like DHEA, or when you do things like reach out and experience social connection during stress, you boost that oxytocin, which really nicely balances cortisol and the way that cortisol, gives you energy during stress. So I would say like that's, and then I don't know if any of that was relevant to the question that was
absolutely,
asked. I'd ask Laura to say more, but I don't see anything else there.
It's creating.
It's all very complex.
It is. But thank you so much for breaking that down for us. It means so much. I don't know if anyone has a question. Shalene here says that she was so happy with what you talked about since so many people were weight focused or are weight focused. And Laura loved it. Everyone loved it. Quick question from me. If no one has a question, but you do have some time for one if you want. Nature, because this one really resonated for me. The idea of going out to nature and why that's good for us, right? In terms of the joy of movement in nature. For many of us, we have been locked in, and it's a very different experience working in the living room or working out in the living room and being in a forest. The forest is my happy place. And if I'm not out there, enough times a week, you don't want to be around me. I'm not a nice person. Why? What's happening? What's happening in the brain? What is the reason for nature really being a wonderful place to engage with life?
So I'll address that and also say I got a direct message question that you can't see that I'll address afterwards. And yes, so I'll make those my last two questions.
Yeah.
So nature. So there's this thing called biophilia. It's like a natural human instinct to have certain emotions evoked by being in natural environments or paying attention to nature. Like for me, it's watching animals or watching bugs. Like that's my version of, for other people, it's actually like being outdoors in nature. We tend to experience emotions like awe and wonder, gratitude and transcendence. And this idea is that it's part of how humans evolved, that it was really important for us as a species to be able to explore the outdoors with both courage and an openness to possibility, because we had to find food and we had to find water and we had to figure out what was safe and navigate those constantly changing environments. And so we're equipped to have these emotional reactions to nature that made it easier for us to survive living in a natural environment. And so we can exploit that now to our benefit by giving ourselves opportunities to explore nature, to take on challenges in nature, like going for a hike or, going into open water. We can do it by paying attention to all of the sensory triggers in the natural environment. Like I love listening to the sound of different birds. Where I live, there are a lot of different types of birds, and that's my main exposure to nature. I also love going out to my backyard and just looking for, bugs and squirrels and watching them. It's very, for me, it's very both soothing and centering and inspiring. So I would just encourage you to figure out what your version of that is. Most people will have a particular way of relating to nature that pushes that button in their brain or in their heart. And there are studies showing that here's a way that you could do that, where people were asked to notice 3 things in nature every day that was interesting or awe-inspiring or beautiful, and either to write it down or take a picture of it. And like that, what a great practice that is. Like just one a day, take a picture of something in nature that's interesting or inspiring. But I'm going to go with the last question, was one that I got by direct message. And that was the question of, what advice would you give a student dealing with stress, particularly one who's had a panic attack before an exam? So I'll give you an answer that I'm basically speaking to my younger self. I remember literally having a panic attack before a final exam, and my TA trying to give me advice as I was having a panic attack in the hallway. And he's like, I don't understand. You're such a good student. I'm like, it's not about being a good student. This is a panic attack. So let me just say, first of all, this is coming from a place of true empathy. Here's what the research says, and also what my experience confirms. People who have really serious anxiety, including panic attacks, the most important thing to do is to learn how to tolerate them, accept them, and understand that they are on that same spectrum that I talked about, where your body is trying to rise to the challenge. And panic attacks are not a sign that you are inadequate. They are not a true sign of threat. It's just the wiring got a little bit too overblown. It's like you went just past that rise to the challenge. I've got all the energy and the focus that I need to do my best. Your body just goes a little too far, and it feels like a nightmare. But it's on that same spectrum, and it doesn't mean anything. And so what you have to do is learn how to tolerate it and how to talk to yourself about being able to trust yourself in moments like that. And often starts with trusting yourself to have a panic attack. I know that sounds really hard to do. And often if this is, so I don't know if the person who asked this has like clinical level panic attacks or just feels really anxious, but this is something that is really well addressed with a therapist who understands this approach. But if you're someone who just gets really anxious and it's kind of like a panic attack, studies show that if in that moment you remind yourself that it's natural to be anxious and that your anxiety can actually help you perform better because you are prepared for this, you did train for this, that can help turn the anxiety and even like that real fight or flight physiology and start to transition it back towards a challenge response. So it's something to try out. And I will say that this is different than the advice a lot of people get, which is about controlling your anxiety. Like, here's a breathing technique that will calm you down. In my experience,
you don't think that's a good idea?
It's not, if it works. A lot of people have a paradoxical reaction to it because it just reinforces the idea that something is radically wrong in this moment. And often the more you try to control your physiology, you have a paradoxical reaction in the other direction. So if it works for you, like if it's a tool that's working, that's great. But you don't actually have to control it in order to move forward. And sometimes you can actually think about anxiety as being like a wave that you surf. And you get on it and you just hang on for dear life to that surfboard. And eventually the wave crashes on its own without you having to control it. This is the same technique that's taught for people who are struggling with addiction and a craving, or people who have urges to enact violence. This is a very common technique that's taught, which is you can't suppress it. You can't necessarily control it, but you can breathe with it and literally surf that urge or surf that intensity of emotion, and trust that the intensity of it will dissolve.
incredible that you can just breathe through it and go through it. And that it's actually preparing you to do something that's meaningful, right?
Yeah.
Versus it's standing in your way. Just reframing that whole mindset. I love that. And actually the way you ended your TED talk, I wrote it down because I liked this a lot. It said that chasing meaning is better for your health than trying to avoid discomfort. Trust yourself to handle the stress that follows.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. Kelly, I don't know what to say. You are so awesome. This is like the best thing I've done all year is have a chance to speak with you and to learn from you. We're so grateful for your time. It's a Friday night where you are, and you've been so busy, helping so many other people. You're on an incredible mission and it's working, and we wish you nothing but the best. Did you guys think she was awesome? I could see it here in the chat.
I see a question in the chat that I want to address really quick. Feel free to say I'm awesome or complaints also accepted. Okay, I don't have the URL on me right now, but gosh, I'm going to enter something in the chat.
Okay, please.
That if you Google, hold on, let me get this to everyone. So Stanford University has a website where they give descriptions of and instructions for a lot of different mindset interventions, and many of them are designed for students. Okay. So if you Google what I put in here, Stanford Wise Interventions, or maybe Stanford Psychology Wise Interventions, you will probably get yourself to this website where they have descriptions and tools if you like the kind of thing I was talking about.
Absolutely. No, that's phenomenal. Thank you. So much insight, but also actionables. Do you know what I mean? That's what's really helpful from today. And so we're really, really grateful. You're incredibly inspiring. And to, of course, to the SAS advancement team and the, everyone who was part of the community in the Wellness Summit, you put together something incredible and got in contact with this powerhouse. And we're just so grateful to everyone who joined.
Hey, Mary just shared the link in the chat. It was Wise Interventions. Thank you.
Look at this.
Or Marie. I'm sorry, I might be saying your name wrong. I apologize.
Or Mari. I'm not sure.
Oh, no.
Thank you, everybody. All right, Anne, should I leave that over to you? Or I don't want to be the one to close everything up, but I'm just really grateful. Kelly, you're a rock star. Thanks to everyone for being a part of this and for help allowing me to have this chat with her and to be here with you on a Saturday. It means the world.